Thank you again for attending the 401k Academy webinar series. My name is J.D. Carlson, and I will be your host today. Again, as you guys hear me say tons of times, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, whether that's for live events or on the webinar, because as I consistently mention, I know you get invites to a lot of stuff. So again, to thank you for that, we'll do our very best to make this effective, make it valuable. Many of you have attended before, so I won't spend a lot of time kind of on the housekeeping slides here. Obviously, you can attend this webinar via your computer and the speakers attached to your computer if you have that technology. Otherwise, you can call in to the phone number and use the access code provided in the email confirm that you received. For this presentation, all the attendees are muted. This is not because we are not interested in your questions. We absolutely are. It's just to keep it moving forward and avoid any kind of technology glitches. So if you do have questions, comments, or thoughts, please send us an email after the webinar or give us a call. You've got my contact information there as J.D. Carlson. You've got my two sales consultants in the Bay Area, Trig Jones and Chad Johansson, and you can reach out to any one of us with your feedback. PlanSight Consultants is the power, the engine behind the 401k Academy. We are a third-party administrator founded in 1975 and partner with financial advisors to help you prospect, market, sell, close, and retain 401k retirement plan business. In addition to our 401k Academy live events, as you're well aware, since you're attending one now, we do a heavy dose of webinars. And if you haven't been able to attend some of the past webinars, the plan analysis approach and the ETF are available via a recorded video on the 401k Academy website if you ever want to check those out, and soon to be the open architecture presentation. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to come back and catch up on something that you missed on, you can do that as well via the 401k Academy website. Look for dates by December 1st for the 2012 401k Academy live events. And as I mentioned yesterday, if you were at our event in Mountain View at the American Century campus, we'll be shifting to 2 larger events next year as opposed to the quarterly strategy that we had for 2011. But if you attended those live events, thank you very much. We had a great 2011 series, and we look forward to 2012. With that, let's hop into the topic for today, and I'm hoping my goal is to keep this very quick and very efficient, but obviously valuable. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly and stop on the parts that I feel important. We're going to review financial advisor compensation in retirement plans. And to kind of kick that off, I want to make the point that the reality is that in most situations when selling these types of plans, the financial advisor's compensation is very flexible, meaning it can be adjusted, it can be dialed up or down depending upon the situation. And most of you are aware of that. There are some exceptions. There are some programs that have limited compensation or maybe even one fixed rate, but for the most part, it can be dialed up or down based on what you're trying to accomplish. However, from the employer's perspective, I believe that, and again, this depends on your level of presentation skills, your level of education, your ability, or your focus on transparency, but I would say that typically the decision maker seems to think that your compensation is somehow built into the program at a fixed rate. And what I mean by that is that it is what it is, and there's nothing that can be done about it. And obviously that's pretty far from the truth. depending upon how you structure your proposals, you can customize it for that client. So the goal of this webinar, in my mind, is that if we can help you build a strong knowledge base around advisor comp within retirement plans, then you can use that to your advantage when working with clients or when out there trying to win new 401k business. So that's our goal for today. Let's go to the next slide, or see if I can get to the next slide. Here we go. I want to bring up a typical situation when we get started here. When you are in a point of sale, this question comes up the great majority of the time, and if it doesn't, it probably should. Any consumer would be smart to ask this question, but I see this question get asked a lot, and that is quite simply looking at the advisor and saying, you know, what or how do you get paid on this deal? And unfortunately, the answer that we see very commonly is kind of a avoid the question, but, you know, my compensation is built into the program. Everything you're seeing, I'm built into it without any real clarity on what exactly you're getting paid. And our advice to you would be not to be that advisor. Don't take that approach. I think it's always very, very smart to walk into a point of sale being prepared to look someone in the eye, that decision maker, and with confidence tell them exactly what you will get paid. And what I mean by that is, you know, if it's a $2 million plan and you've built in a 50 basis point trail compensation, you would say to that decision maker, well, based on your $2 million, and if your plan averaged $2 million over 12 months, my 50 basis points, or half of 1%, would pay me $10,000 approximately. And then you could even go on to explain that, you know, broker-dealer would take a haircut from that. But if you can do that with confidence, that's really what they're looking for from you. And I say this from experience as a business owner. I can tell you how many times I've been sold something, whether it has something to do with a real estate deal or some product that my company uses, and I ask this very question of the salesperson, whether corporate or independent, you know, how are you getting paid on this deal? And when I get the dodgy answer or the kind of, you know, slick, you know, going around it, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And to the contrary, when that person stands up and says, well, hey, here's what I make, it builds trust with me, and I feel more comfortable with that person. So probably stating the obvious for many of you, but don't be that advisor that just kind of scoots past what you're getting paid. As I dive deeper into financial advisor comp, we have to understand that the vendor type has influence on the compensation type, right? So there's variations within vendor types. And when I say vendor types, I'm going to refer to today the insurance company, the mutual fund family, or the open architecture record keeper type of vendor. And so within these variations, an insurance company could have an NAV, net asset value type of program that's using share class and mutual funds, but more typically it's probably using a group annuity type of structure or a trust platform. And the fees are going to be one of two things. You know, for you, it's going to be built into a wrap fee, or it's going to be dependent upon the 12B1s, and I'll go into this a little deeper. So typically when you're dealing with an insurance company, you're looking at wrap fee. Not always the case, but typically the case. And because of this insurance company, they also have this ability to pay a financial advisor an upfront amount on the transfer of assets. And again, I'll touch more on that. From a mutual fund program, again, typically, I know there's some exceptions, but typically it's going to be the 12B1 fees that are going to be used to compensate the advisor. And in an open architecture program, you'd be looking at a choice. You know, depending upon whether you're a registered rep or an RIA, you might utilize the 12B1s and or set it up in some type of layered on wrap fee, and I'll cover that in a little more detail. So the goal here is let's take a look at how it's typically done, what are best practices, what do we see at Planners and Consultants as happening a lot. What are the actual numbers? You know, what do we see on $1 million versus $2 million versus $5 million types of plans? And then I'd like to share with you some concepts around if there's a better way. Before I do that, I'm going to try to, just one time this morning, get some interaction from you. So I've created a fun little poll, and this is the first time I've done this, but I'm going to hit this launch button up here, and there's going to be a question for you, and we'll give you, 15 seconds or so to answer a simple question, and we'll see how you all view this type of question. So there it goes. The question is, in your opinion, what's the typical advisor compensation on a $500,000 plan with 30 participants? So do you see that as a 50 basis point trail, a 75 basis point trail? Is it a 1%, what we call a 1 in 25, a 1% on the transfer, and a 25 basis point trail, or is it maybe like a 1% trail? And so plug your answer. There's no right or wrong answer, really. It's more about what do you think is typical? Not what's correct, not what's right, but what's typical. And we're watching your votes come in right now. I got about 75% of you, so if you haven't voted yet, there we go, 88% of you. And there's some discrepancy, you guys. There we go, 94%, that's good. Let's see what happens if I click here. Oh, I don't know if you guys can see the answers or not. I'm hoping you could, but it looks like you can't. I'll give you the answers. 20% of you said a 50 basis point trail, 33% of you said a 75 basis point trail, and equal 33% said the 1% on transfer and 25 trail, and 13% said 100 basis points. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but I can tell you with immense confidence that in this industry on a $500,000 plan, 8 times out of 10 what you're looking at is number 3, the 1% on the transfer and the 25 basis point trail. I won't say that's motivated from your end so much as it's motivated from the record keeper end. I think they want to pay you that 1%. They want to attract you to selling these plans, and I agree with many of your other answers that you might be better suited with a 75 trail or even a 1% trail. But the typical is the 1% up front, and we'll talk more about that. Let's cruise into the next slide. I'm going to talk about the compensation involved with insurance companies. And you've heard me say this 1,000 times, but it's a fact that the insurance companies dominate this marketplace. So let me take a moment to talk about how they structure their payments to advisors. Again, as I mentioned earlier, in most cases the compensation is extremely flexible, and it's up to the financial advisor. Again, you can dial it up or down depending upon the situation. I just mentioned this, but what typically happens is you, the advisor, are going to reach out to those record keepers, and they may guide you on what is best practices. You may say, well, hey, you tell me, on 500,000, what's common. There's a bit of conflict of interest there in that they might tell you what they're hoping would keep the price down and keep it competitively instead of what really fits your business model, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But whatever the case, whatever the compensation is chosen, it'll have a direct impact on the asset-based fee or the wrap fee if that's how the insurance product is structured, and most of them are. So as an example, if your advisor comp goes up, then the program cost is going to go up. Example, if you wanted a 25 trail on a program and that equated to a record keeper or a vendor wrap of 75, if you then up that to a 50 trail, well, you're going to see an equal basis point per basis point rise in cost to the wrap fee. So going from 25 to 50 would affect the wrap fee from 75 to 1%. I've oversimplified it, but that's pretty much how it works in many of the insurance company products. To give you some additional info, if you did a 1 in 50 or a 1 in 25 and something like that, it's always going to equate to some type of straight trail. And that's a good way to look at it. So from an industry average, a 1 in 50, could equate to a 50 base, excuse me, that's a typo there. That should be a 1 in 25. A 1 in 25, a 1% at 25 trail typically is going to equate to a 40 or 50 basis point cost increase, depending upon the vendor and how their actuaries have looked at it. But that's a pretty good range. From a mutual fund standpoint, I'd say it's probably a lot simpler because this is kind of kicking it old school a little more. You're going to use share class, right? So when you're in a mutual fund product, it's the share class that's going to determine the compensation, or I should more specifically say the 12b1 fees that are built into that fund that will determine your compensation. Typically, when you're dealing with a mutual fund family, I'll use American Funds as an example. They're going to pre-package a certain share class in their offering. So, if it's a 50 basis point trail that you're looking for, they're going to use only R3 share classes, and that's the pre-packaging that I'm talking about. So what typically happens is based on the size, you, the advisor, will decide on a few options. Should I use the R4? Should I use the R3? Should I use the R2 as an example within American Funds? And depending upon that choice, you'll either get the 25, the 50, or the 75 trail. Again, advisor comp goes up and the program cost goes up. The only difference in this situation is the program cost is not going up by a higher wrap fee. The program cost is going up by a rise in share class or an increase in the expense ratio of the fund. And lastly, we'll look at open architecture. And from an open architecture record keeper standpoint, advisor comp can be done in a very flexible manner in several different ways. If you're a registered rep, you're more than likely going to utilize a share class, similar to what we just talked about with the mutual fund family and American funds. You're going to need to look at, yes, open architecture, tens of thousands of mutual funds, but you're going to have to choose from funds that will pay you the proper 12b1. You want even level pay. You want to be choosing some funds that have a 50 12b1 and some funds that have 25. You'd want to level that out. And most record keepers, OpenArch can help you with that subset of funds. If you're not acting as a registered rep, you're going to act as a registered investment advisor or as an IAR, investment advisor representative, you could then layer on a fee. So in a sense, choose institutional share class, share class of funds that do not have any 12b1s or sub-TAs or very minimal sub-TAs, and then keep those costs low and then layer on your fee as the 50 basis point trail, or even as a flat dollar amount, maybe it's $2,000 per quarter that you look at. And I'll talk a little bit more about strategies around that. So again, what typically happens is based on the size of the plan and based on how that advisor is going to act, whether an RIA, IAR, or a registered rep, we're going to decide on the proper option. And the same thing's true. If advisor comp goes up, then the program cost goes up, which is okay. You're providing a service. When you talk advisor comp, I'm sure many of you came to this webinar thinking, all right, I want to see a list, I want to see what these guys think, when it comes to a $350,000 plan or a $500,000 plan or a $10 million plan, what's the typical compensation that's out there? And I would tell you that that's very difficult to do, especially if you're going to talk about upfront or on-transfer commissions and trails in the same sentence as straight trails, because that can confuse things a bit. But I could tell you that these are probably somewhat general numbers. Now, fortunately or fortunately, we live in a free enterprise, and that means that some people can offer things for much less, and others can offer them for much more, and we're all dependent upon communicating the value of our services. So I think it's kind of crazy for you and probably a disservice to you as an advisor to have any type of matrix like this where you're saying, all right, on this size of plan, this is what compensation should be. I think it's good to know what your competition is and what's out there. But I'd like to drill a little further than just these kind of flat numbers, kind of these industry norm numbers. I'd like to take this conversation deeper, in that I feel like there's a flaw in the way it's done right now. I mean, the way it's done right now is an advisor comes across a prospect. And, you know, let's say that's a $3 million plan, and that plan has some interest in meeting with them and having that advisor help fix their situation. And the advisor is going to reach out to different vendors, and many times my team's going to assist that advisor, and we're going to put proposals together based on a certain level of comp. And I'm just as guilty of this as many of you on the call. You know, we're going to say, hey, it's a $3 million plan. Let's build in a 40 basis point trail or whatever the case may be, and let's go in and present. Here you are, like many advisors, walking in saying, here's my proposal, here's the cost, here's how it matches up against what you have. But why are we not first, before determining price, asking, you know, the number of participants? I guess we do ask the size of assets and number of participants, right, because we know that when we create the proposals. But more important than those two factors, you know, how many group employee meetings does the client want? There's clients out there that would prefer you not bother them, and one meeting a year is sufficient. There's other prospects out there that would demand of you to come and meet quarterly. How often do they want a fiduciary review meeting? You know, is that a quarterly fiduciary review meeting? Or is that a semi-annual fiduciary review meeting? Or is it once a year? Or, you know, I'm not endorsing this, or the type of client says, you gotta get out of my hair, you know, bother me every 2 years or something. How often do they want you to benchmark the plan and to do a formal RFP, request for proposal process? Is that every year, every 3 years, every 4 years? Are you dealing with a $1 million plan with one location down the street from your office? Or are you dealing with a $1 million plan with 6 locations, you know, stretching from Monterey to Sacramento, or even out of state? What type of travel requirements are involved? Are there any special needs? You know, do you have to deal with English as a second language? Is there a 321 or a 338 fiduciary role? And I wouldn't call this a fully comprehensive list. I mean, you could add tons of bullet points to this. My point is, shouldn't you know these things first before you determine what your fees are going to be? And I'm not saying this to grind anyone on the call so much as I am trying to improve your chance at winning business. I'm looking at this more from the decision maker's perspective and what they might like to see. Let's take it a step further just from a perspective standpoint. And I'm not recommending that you do this as part of your practice, although if you think it sounds attractive and you have the ability, then more power to you. But I want you to know that there are advisors out there that are walking into these plans and saying, geez, you pay your current guy, 75 basis points on your plan, and you pay him the same amount whether your plan's $2 million or grows to 2.5 or grows to 3. I mean, he makes more depending upon how your assets grow. If you hired me, I would just determine how many meetings you need, how much time I'm going to spend in terms of hours. I would convert that to a flat fee. You know, I would tell you, regardless whether your plan's $1 million, $2 million, or $10 million, my fee is going to be dependent upon the amount of time I spend, and it'll be a flat fee. That not a percent of assets, but a flat dollar amount. And again, just giving you perspective, but how do you think a decision maker would react to that? Or how would you react if you heard that? And my thought is you'd probably react pretty positively. You'd be like, geez, that makes sense, you know. Someone who wants to equate their fee for the service, what an awesome concept. So something to think about. I don't think you have to go that far. But I'm just giving you some perspective, and maybe you can take a little bit of that into your approach. Our team goes to many of these point of sales, and I can tell you as a fact that the competition is not asking these questions to determine compensation. You know, if there's someone that went in to sell before you and someone that's going to sell after you, if you're in a competitive situation, the odds are fairly good that they're not sitting down and saying, well, let's talk about what you need from me before I tell you how much my cost is going to be. So I pose the question to you that, what if you went in with your own business model matrix, calculator, or grid, or whatever you want to call it? You think about your business, what you need to make it profitable, how much time you spend on providing your value to the client, come up with your own matrix. Obviously, this is business. It's got to be competitive. It's got to fit somewhere in the marketplace. But create your own grid. And then when you go to a point of sale and you're asked that question, what or how do you get paid? You can respond with a different response. That's a great question. But for me to answer that question, I really first need to ask you some questions about what you're looking for from me. And if you could say that in plain English and say, hey, doesn't that make sense? You tell me how many meetings you want from me, how often you want me down here, what responsibilities I'm gonna do, and then I can tell you what my fee's gonna be. That way, and I'll use the quote here, but we can discuss exactly what your objectives are, and I can match my fees to that service. Without going down the 408B2 rabbit hole here, I think that fits very well with 408B2 as well. So I hope that gives you a little different perspective on financial advisor comp. If you want to know specifically what different advisors are not their names and what they're charging, but what we see as a whole, Chad and Tariq can share with you, when they run $1 million quote, what's typical. But I'd love to see some of you start this trend towards matching services for fees, and not to hinder your profitability. I want to make your profitability better, but mostly I want it to look in the eyes of a decision maker and say, wow, that seems like a logical approach, and then that helps you win the business because you're doing it a little different than your competition. So thanks again for your time. Again, if you have any questions, reach out. What's next? We got November 16th, which is Creative 401k Designs. There's some changes for 2012. We'll discuss those. Excited about December 7th because we're going to show you a different approach, which is make a plan very easy from an HR perspective. See if you can show your prospects a super easy to work with program. And we'll have 2012 401k Academy events dates coming your way. So thanks again. Appreciate it. And have a great work day. And thank you. And have a great day.